When Evelyn Carter moved into her quiet suburban home, she never expected a phone call to shatter her nights. At exactly midnight, her phone rang with no number, no name, just silence, followed by a sound that chilled her to the core. What began as static soon turned into something far more disturbing, her own voice calling from the other side. It began so quietly that I almost dismissed it as nothing. That first night I was drifting between sleep and wakefulness, my body heavy against the mattress, the air still and hushed. Midnight had just slipped in, unnoticed, until the shrill ring of my phone shattered the silence. It wasn't the kind of sound that makes you groggy and confused. It was sharp, piercing, like a sudden alarm meant to snap me awake. My eyes shot open, heart instantly racing. I reached for my phone on the nightstand, the glow of the screen almost blinding in the darkness. What unsettled me wasn't just the time displayed 12 a.m. sharp, but the fact that there was no name, no number. The screen was blank, only the green outline of the call pulsing with each ring. My stomach turned. I don't know why I answered. Curiosity, maybe, or some buried instinct that I'd regret. My thumb slid across the screen and I raised it to my ear. Nothing, no voice, no words, just a faint crackling, like a broken radio barely tuned to a station. At first I thought it was static, just empty noise, but as I lay there, straining to listen, I realized the sound wasn't random. It rose and fell in rhythm, deep and slow. It sounded like breathing long, deliberate breaths, close enough that I could almost feel them against my ear. My skin prickled, a cold rush spreading through me. I froze, holding my breath as if it might stop whatever was on the other end from hearing me. My chest ached until I finally exhaled, and in that moment the static hitched. Like the person, if it was a person, was matching my rhythm. A chill spread across my body. I slammed the phone down onto the bed and ended the call, my hands trembling. I told myself it had to be a mistake, a wrong number, some kind of glitch, or maybe just my mind twisting meaningless noise into something sinister. But sleep no longer felt safe. I lay awake in the dark, listening to the hollow silence of my room. Every creak of the house amplified into something threatening. Just as my eyelids began to grow heavy again, the phone rang a second time. This time it was worse. I didn't answer, but I watched the screen, the same blank caller glowing against the darkness. My pulse thundered in my ears as the ringing went on, relentless. Then, as suddenly as it had started, it stopped. I unlocked the phone, expecting to see the call log filled with unknown numbers, but there was nothing, no record. It was as if the call had never happened at all. The longer I stared at the screen, the more my reflection seemed strange in the glass, distorted in the dim glow. I shut it off quickly and placed it face down on the nightstand. The room grew quiet again, but it wasn't the comforting kind of quiet. It was the heavy, pressing kind, where every second stretches long and thin, filled with waiting. I pulled the blanket tighter around me, but warmth didn't come. My mind kept circling back to that sound, those slow breaths, not mine, not natural, but deliberate. I wondered if the static voice, or whatever it was, had been trying to form words, and I'd been too afraid to let it finish. That thought alone kept me stiff, wide-eyed, staring into the dark for what felt like hours. Finally, exhaustion started to drag me under, pulling me into a half-sleep where reality and dream blurred. That's when I heard it again, a faint whisper, soft but unmistakable, rising from the silence. It wasn't coming from outside or from my imagination. It was coming from the phone. I sat up in bed, every hair on my body standing on end. The phone lay face down on the nightstand, the screen dark, but the whisper threaded through the room like smoke. I leaned closer, my breath shallow, trying to make out the words. They were broken, distorted, impossible to understand, yet the cadence was human, like someone trying desperately to speak through a bad connection. My hand hovered over the phone, but I didn't pick it up. I was too afraid of what I'd hear if I pressed it to my ear. So I sat there, listening, heart hammering in my chest. The whispers grew softer, fading, until they slipped away completely. I thought it was finally over, but then I saw the faintest glow from under the phone, a weak pulse of light even though the device was turned off. My skin went cold as ice. The phone wasn't ringing anymore. It was watching, and in that glow I thought I saw something flicker across the screen. Not numbers, not words. A face. The following day felt heavier than usual, like the night had drained something from me. I carried an ache in my chest, a dull fear that clung no matter how many times I tried to shake it off. I spent most of the day convincing myself that I had imagined everything, that exhaustion had blurred reality and dream together. But deep down I knew it wasn't just a trick of my mind. The memory of that glow, of what I thought I saw flickering on the phone screen, stayed lodged in me like a splinter I couldn't dig out. When the sun went down, the unease grew. My house seemed to quiet, every tick of the clock on the wall reminding me of the hours slipping toward midnight. I told myself I wouldn't look at my phone when the time came, that I'd ignore it, pretend nothing was wrong. But when the clock hands lined up at 12, the sound came again. The ring pierced the silence, shrill and precise. My heart leaped into my throat, but I forced myself to stay still. I watched the screen flash from across the room. I told myself not to answer, but then something I couldn't explain happened. My old phone, the one I hadn't touched in years, lit up on my desk. Its cracked screen glowed with the same blank caller ID. It hadn't worked in ages, yet there it was, alive in the dark. Both phones were ringing in perfect harmony, the sound colliding in the small space of my room, bouncing off the walls like something alive. My body refused to move, though every instinct screamed for me to run. I stared at the old phone, its faint light spilling across the papers and dust where it had sat forgotten. I couldn't remember the last time I had even charged it, but it was glowing as if it had never died. With shaking hands I got up and unplugged it, pulling the dead charger free. The screen should have gone dark, but the glow didn't fade. Instead, the ringing grew louder, and for the first time, I realized the sound wasn't coming only from the phones. It was vibrating through the walls, humming through the floorboards, seeping into the very air. The noise became unbearable, drilling into my skull, until suddenly it stopped. The silence that followed was even worse, stretched thin like a suffocating blanket. My ears rang, but beneath that, I felt a presence. Someone, or something, was here with me. The air grew colder, heavy, almost pressing down on my chest. I couldn't see anyone, but I didn't need to. The feeling of being watched was so strong it made my skin crawl. I tried to steady my breathing, to keep from making a sound, but I couldn't stop the quick rise and fall of my chest. My eyes darted across the room, searching for proof I wasn't losing my mind. That's when I saw it. On the wall opposite my bed, stretching unnaturally tall, was a shadow. It stood perfectly still, even though nothing in my room could have cast it. The outline was human but elongated, the head slanting slightly as if listening. I squeezed my eyes shut, whispering to myself inside my mind that it wasn't real, that it couldn't be real. When I opened them again, the shadow was gone. The only light in the room came from the faint glow of the broken old phone, its cracked display buzzing softly, the caller still lingering. I forced myself to pick it up, hands trembling. The number was still blank, but now something new burned faintly into the glass. At first it looked like smudges, but the longer I stared, the clearer it became. A string of numbers etched themselves across the broken screen, glowing faintly like scars left behind. The digits didn't form a phone number. They were wrong, arranged strangely, like a sequence or code. My chest tightened as I leaned closer, trying to decipher it, when I realized the numbers weren't random. They matched the exact time the call had started, midnight, down to the second. I dropped the phone onto the desk, backing away, my pulse hammering. But as soon as it left my hand, I noticed something else. Across the room, on my other phone still lying on the nightstand, the same numbers burned through the darkened glass. The two screens pulsed together, glowing faintly, like twin heartbeats in the silence of my room. And for the briefest second, I swore I saw those numbers shift, transforming into something that looked almost like letters, almost like a name. The next morning I avoided looking at either of the phones. I left the old broken one on my desk, its screen cracked, but still faintly glowing, and the other still sat on the nightstand. I couldn't bring myself to touch them. Every time my eyes lingered, my stomach turned. I went about the day like a ghost, moving through routines on autopilot. My mind always circling back to those numbers burned into the glass. Midnight, always midnight. As the day bled into evening, I dreaded the night ahead. The walls of the house felt closer than usual, the air heavier. I left the lights on in every room, but even then, the shadows seemed to crawl in the corners. I told myself I wouldn't answer again, no matter how many times it rang. I'd ignore it, let it ring out, and maybe eventually it would stop. But when the clock struck 12, the sound came sharper than ever before. The phone on my nightstand lit up first, vibrating across the wood. I kept my hands clenched tight against the blanket, heart pounding in my throat. Then, a second later, the broken phone on the desk lit up too, its fractured glass glowing brighter than I'd ever seen. Both of them rang together, the sound pressing into me from every direction. I tried to hold out, tried to ignore them, but the ringing didn't stop. It only grew more frantic, louder, almost desperate. My chest ached from the weight of it, like the noise itself was crushing me. Finally, I snapped. With trembling fingers, I grabbed the phone from the nightstand and pressed it to my ear. The silence that followed was worse than the ringing. For a few seconds, I thought maybe the call had already ended, but then I heard it, a voice. First, it was nothing more than a low hum, vibrating in my bones. Then it began to rise, forming broken sounds, and with a jolt of horror I realized what I was hearing. It was my own voice, not an echo, not a recording. It was speaking words in a tone that was undeniably mine, yet twisted. Slower, deeper, distorted into something unrecognizable. My skin prickled, cold spreading across every inch of me. I couldn't understand what it was saying, but the cadence was wrong, like something trying to mimic human speech and failing. I pulled the phone away, but the sound didn't stop. It filled the room, spilling from the air itself, my warped voice vibrating through the walls. It grew louder, overlapping itself, like 1,000 distorted versions of me whispering and growling in unison. I wanted to scream, but no sound left my throat. The pressure in my skull built until I thought it would split me apart. Then, as suddenly as it had started, it cut off. The silence was so sharp it hurt. My ears rang, but nothing else. My body shook uncontrollably, and when I dared look at the screen again, the call had ended. The blank number had disappeared, but something new was there. A contact had been saved. Just one word burned across the screen. Me. I dropped the phone like it was on fire, my breathing ragged. The glow of the cracked phone across the room pulsed faintly, matching the beat of my chest. I sat there frozen, staring at the word on the screen, unable to tear my eyes away. I didn't sleep the rest of the night. I couldn't. Every time I closed my eyes, I imagined that voice. My own voice twisted into something unearthly, whispering into my ear. I could still feel the vibrations in my bones, still hear the echoes of something that wasn't mine, but wore my voice like a mask. When the first light of dawn seeped through the blinds, it didn't bring relief. It only revealed how empty and wrong my room felt. Like something had been here during the night and was still hiding just out of sight. I forced myself to move, to pick up the phone again, praying that what I saw had been some dream, some illusion. But the name was still there. Me, a reminder burned into the glass. A name I hadn't saved. And as I stared, the faintest vibration hummed in the phone. Not a ring, not a call, just a steady pulse, beating in time with my heart. The days started to blur after that. My body moved through routines, but my mind was trapped in a loop, always circling back to that saved contact, my own name staring at me from the screen like a threat. I stopped answering the calls, but it didn't matter. Midnight came and the phones always lit up, glowing in unison. Sometimes they rang. Sometimes they didn't. Sometimes the sound would explode into my ears even when I hadn't touched them, like the call had already been accepted without me. The voice kept changing. Some nights it was a whisper, fragile and broken, crawling out of the static as though something was trying to form words. Other nights it was raw screaming, distorted so badly the sound shook the walls. I never recognized the words, but the tone was always familiar, always tied to me. No matter what it said, I knew it wasn't someone else speaking, it was me, or something wearing me. I noticed things around the house beginning to shift. At first it was small, doors left open when I knew I had shut them. Objects moved a few inches from where I'd left them. Then it became worse. The bathroom mirror was fogged one morning, even though I hadn't showered. A dark shape appeared in the corner of my vision while I brushed my teeth, but vanished when I turned. I told myself it was stress, that lack of sleep was playing tricks, but that excuse was losing its strength. One night I caught the reflection of something in the black screen of my television. At first I thought it was just my own outline, but the figure behind me was wrong. Too tall, too still. Its head tilted unnaturally to the side, like it was listening. I spun around, heart hammering, but the room was empty. When I looked back, the TV screen only showed me, pale and trembling. By the fourth night, fear had become routine. I stayed awake in bed, waiting for the call I knew was coming, every muscle tight with dread. When the ring came, sharp and piercing, I didn't look, I didn't move. I told myself if I ignored it, maybe it would fade. But the screen glowed brighter, painting the walls in sickly light. I could feel the vibration crawling up the wooden frame of my nightstand, shaking the floor beneath me. I snapped. I grabbed the phone and hurled it across the room. It hit the wall with a loud crack and fell to the floor. For a second I thought it was finally over, but then I heard the faint buzz of vibration on the wood. The phone was still glowing, screen cracked and battery hanging loose, yet the call persisted. The shattered glass pulsed with light, the same blank number flashing in the dark. I froze, unable to move, as the glow from the broken screen illuminated something I hadn't noticed before. In the reflection of the fragments, a shape crouched in the corner of the room. It was faint, like a shadow cast where no light existed, but it was there. A figure, limbs bent awkwardly, its face o'er the place where a face should be shrouded in darkness. I couldn't breathe, my chest locked up, panic holding me in place. The figure didn't move, it just crouched there, watching. I shut my eyes, hoping that when I opened them again it would be gone, that it was just another trick of exhaustion. But when I forced my eyes open, the reflection remained. The phone on the floor flickered, and for a split second the number on the screen changed. It wasn't blank anymore, it was my number, my own phone calling me. I stumbled backward, my legs shaking so violently I nearly fell. The reflection of the crouched figure seemed to follow, always clinging to the shards of broken glass. No matter where I moved, I couldn't bring myself to look directly into the corner, afraid of what I might see. The vibration of the broken phone grew louder, no longer a buzz but a deep hum that rattled through the floorboards. The shadow in the reflection leaned forward, head tilting closer, like it was straining to hear the beat of my pulse. I pressed my hands over my ears, but it didn't help. The sound was inside me now, vibrating through my ribs, crawling up into my skull. My knees buckled and I collapsed onto the floor, staring at the pulsing glow. And then, in the smallest crack of glass, I saw it. Not just the figure, not just the shadow, a glimpse of a face. My face. I couldn't escape it. No matter what I did, the calls returned every night, precise as a clock, the sound embedding itself into me like a sickness. I destroyed the phones, tearing them apart piece by piece, until all that was left was shards of glass and twisted wires. I carried the broken parts outside, scattering them into the trash bin at the far edge of the yard, as if distance could keep them from me. For the first time in days, I felt a sliver of relief, a fragile hope that it might finally be over. That night I lay in bed listening to the silence. It felt wrong, almost too quiet, but I clung to it. Midnight passed, and for the first time, no ringing cut through the air. I let out a shaky breath, convinced I had ended it. My eyes grew heavy, and I let myself drift into the first real sleep I'd had in days. But something woke me. Not a ring, not the vibration of a phone. It was a sound I couldn't place at first, low, faint, like the hiss of a television stuck between channels. My chest tightened as I realized it wasn't coming from outside. It was coming from me. I sat up, clutching my chest. The static hummed deep inside my ribcage, vibrating against my bones. My throat buzzed, each breath broken by that same crackling noise I'd heard through the phone. I staggered to the mirror across the room, desperate to see what was happening. My reflection stared back at me, pale, trembling, but wrong. The lips in the glass moved, though mine stayed frozen. I stumbled closer, horrified as the reflection whispered words in that low, broken tone, the same distorted voice I had heard on the calls. It wasn't delayed. It wasn't reversed. It was leading me, as if it were the original and I was only the copy. I backed away, shaking my head, but the static grew louder inside me, swelling until my ears rang with it. My chest rose and fell with a rhythm that wasn't mine anymore, each breath shallow and mechanical. I pressed my hands over my mouth, desperate to keep the sound from escaping, but it didn't stop. The static was no longer just inside me. It was leaking into the room. The air shimmered faintly, bending like heat rising from pavement. My walls seemed to pulse, warping under the pressure of the noise. Shadows lengthened and twisted, crawling up the walls, stretching across the ceiling. In the corner of the room, the same crouched figure began to form, its outline sharper now, its head tilted in perfect time with the static vibrating from my chest. I couldn't take it anymore. I ran for the door, yanking it open, but the hallway wasn't there. Instead, I was staring into a vast darkness, endless and suffocating. The static poured into it, swallowed whole, and then came back louder, echoing as if from 1,000 unseen mouths. I slammed the door shut and pressed my back against it, heart racing, tears streaming down my face. My room was unrecognizable now. The walls were gone, replaced by shifting black shapes that bent and twisted, writhing in time with the hum inside me. The figure in the corner was closer, its crouched limbs stretching, unfolding as it began to rise. The glow of a screen flickered suddenly on the wall beside me, a perfect square of white light, like a phone display. I staggered toward it, unable to look away. The same blank number stared back at me, waiting to be answered. My hand lifted against my will, trembling inches from the light. I knew if I touched it, something would happen, something final. Before I could stop myself, the call connected. The static cut out instantly, replaced with silence. My ears rang from the absence. Then, slowly, a sound rose from the other end of the connection. Breathing. Deep, deliberate breathing. I waited, frozen, my hand still pressed against the glowing wall. The sound grew clearer, closer, until it no longer felt like it was coming from the wall at all. It was coming from behind me. I turned slowly, every nerve in my body screaming, and saw it. Not the crouched figure, not the shadow, but me. Another version of myself stood in the corner, its face hidden in the dark, body rigid, head tilted slightly like it was listening. The reflection from the glass, the voice on the calls, the distorted breathing, all of it was standing there, separated from me, alive. Its chest rose and fell in perfect time with mine. The static began again, but this time it wasn't inside me. It came from it, from the other me. The glow on the wall flickered, and the cool timer appeared. The line was still open, but the name on the screen wasn't blank anymore. It had changed. The saved contact still read me, only now there were two.